All right, so first of all, thank you for allowing me to come up here and bloviate a little bit. What I like to do before I even talk about who I am and all that is, first I want to kind of gauge public opinion. And be honest with me, I have very thick skin. I just retired as a first sergeant from 20 years in the Army, so I've learned how to, 1 week, I got my 1 week growth on. So that's literally, I've been a civilian for 1 week. So I've got a really thick skin. So I'm going to ask you one of three questions. I'm going to ask who supports constitutional carry, who's on the fence about it, and who opposes it, and specifically open carry. And when I say constitutional carry, what that means is that we can carry according to the Constitution. In other words, uninfringed.
Right.
No licenses, no fees, no background checks, none of this stuff. And I'm going to explain. I know that sounds weird, but I'd like to, hopefully I can explain that stuff to you. So first, just by a show of hands, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody, I just like to know who I'm talking to. Who here supports the idea of open carry and a handgun? Okay.
No restrictions, right?
Well, yeah, no restrictions. Right. Okay, who here's kind of on the fence? They're not sure. Maybe they've got some reservations about it.
Raise my hand.
Okay, well, and does anybody oppose it? Okay, all right. So I'm talking to you, Jeannie.
Like fellas, you know.
Yeah. Well, so that's good because we're one of only 5 states that does not allow the open carry of handguns. This is a rubber gun, by the way. I carry this around just to kind of make a point that if this were a real gun, I'd be a criminal. And actually, if this were a real gun and I were in here, I'd be a felon because this is a TABC licensed facility. So just by virtue of them having a license, if anyone in here, and I don't want to know, but if anyone in here is carrying and you don't have a license, you're a felon. All right? So, with that said, this is why this whole idea of keeping guns from felons is such a crazy, stupid idea. If you go to New York, there are 6 degrees of felonies in New York. If I were to write a hot check over $50 because on my meager military paycheck, I think I can float the check long enough before I get paid again, that's a felony. And so, I mean, seriously, somebody writes a hot check, they shouldn't be allowed to carry a firearm? So this is why we oppose background checks, and I'm going to speak to that specifically, because who does the background check? The government does, right?
Right.
So when they do the background check, who decides what is a discriminating factor? The government. And what have they decided so far? Felonies, right? So they've now decided felonies. They've decided, in some cases, so-called mental defects, mental health defects. If you are involuntarily sent into a rehab clinic, you lose your guns. Yes, sir?
Now, here in Texas, do they also include misdemeanors with a domestic abuse answer as well?
And I'm going to get to that as well. Yeah, I'm working my way down.
Oh, okay.
Working my way down the list. So, and then in Texas, actually, that's exactly where I was going. In Texas, if you have a concealed handgun license and you are convicted on a Class A or B misdemeanor, it doesn't matter what it is. You could be driving down the road, and this is a crazy, I'm an extremist, so I'll use an extreme example. I can be driving down the road in my truck and, maybe have some trash in the back of my pickup truck. And if I'm driving out and that stuff flies out of my truck and there happens to be a cop behind me and he's froggy that day because he didn't fill his quota in traffic tickets, he pulls me over and he charges me with a Class B misdemeanor of littering. Okay? I don't have the money to buy an attorney or hire an attorney. I'm going to plead out, okay, I'll pay for my littering, whatever. Well, now I've got a Class B on my record. Texas says you can't have a CHL for 5 years. I'm a victim of that as well. You may have heard my story about last year, me walking down the road with my son on a hike. I was carrying a rifle strapped across my chest because I live out in the country. I was out in the country. And a police officer came up and tried to take my firearm, and I wouldn't let him willingly take my firearm. Now, at the time, I'd just gotten back from Afghanistan just a few months prior to that. And when a guy grabs your gun, the first thing you do is you try to retain control of that. Weapons retention is what we call it in the military. In basic training, when you're doing your inspection arms, When you've got that thing held and the drill sergeant grabs it, you better put up a struggle for that. Or for the next 2 hours, you're going to be doing front back goes and lifting up rifles. So we're trained in that. So when the officer grabbed my gun and I resisted that effort, at least for about a second and a half, I suddenly found myself arrested for not doing anything against the law. Ultimately, after they changed the charges 3 times, I was arrested for resisting arrest. That changed to disorderly conduct. That changed to walking down the wrong side of the road. Then finally, that changed to interference with the duties of a peace officer. Yes, there's actually a law in Texas about what side of the road you're supposed to walk down. Is this a free state? No. So I was convicted on a Class B misdemeanor after 2 trials, both of which the judge refused to allow evidence. But the fact of the matter is, never in my life had I ever been arrested. I've got a top secret security clearance. I was a counterintelligence agent for the last 14 years of my Army career. I worked on these joint terrorism task forces and counterintelligence and counterterrorism. That's why I know what the fusion cells are and the terrorism task forces and all that kind of stuff. So I helped. After the USS Cole bombing and the Kowar bombings, I went from doing counter-narcotics in the Army down in South America to doing counterterrorism because I felt like I was better suited for that kind of stuff. So never in my life ever been arrested, never had any problems with police officers. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, I'm spending 12 hours in jail for going on a hike with my son. And literally doing nothing wrong except what they later claimed, 6 months later, oh, he was walking down the wrong side of the road because we were challenging the constitutionality of the stop to begin with. So they had to find something, and they dug deep into that transportation code and found walking down the wrong side of the road. So I can't legally carry a firearm in Texas because I'm what I like to call a misdemelon. I'm treated like a felon but convicted of a misdemeanor. It's a non-violent misdemeanor. It's a non-gun related misdemeanor. And yet, for 5 years, at least unless my appeal goes through, and we are an appeal, I can't carry a firearm. So, when we allow the government to decide who enjoys their rights to keep and bear arms through what is called a background check, what are we doing? We're giving them the ability to decide who can carry firearms. Now, do I want violent criminals to have guns? No. But that's not stopping them now. But the best way to deal with a felon with a gun is to have you armed with a gun. And I'm not saying we need to completely get rid of these crimes, but my thoughts are this. If you abuse your right to keep and bear arms by using that right to infringe on someone else's right to life or liberty or their property, then you lose your license. Then you lose your right to keep and bear arms. When you abuse that freedom that you have, should be the only reason, I think, this is my personal opinion, that you lose that right. So that's one of the things that we are fighting against. And I know it's a very controversial thing to say that I don't support background checks, but when you look at it, look what they're trying to do right now. This group, Moms Demand Action, and Bloomberg's AstroTurf organizations and Brady's and all those things, what they're trying to do now is they're trying to further define who cannot have a firearm, who's an exemption. For example, they're trying to label stalkers, people who have a restraining order, you can't have a gun. These people might only have a restraining order because they were verbally abusive or they never threatened anybody. But they want it to where if you've got a restraining order, male or female, or if you're a so-called stalker, what does that really mean? Honestly, and anybody can be a stalker. I mean, I've been stalking the Tea Parties trying to talk to you guys about open carry. So, when we think it sounds good, they're just going to keep chipping away at it, and they're just going to keep chipping away at it. And it sounded good that no one wants felons to have a gun, and we don't realize what constitutes a felony. Here's another crazy example. You're picking up trash on the side of the road, trying to pick up aluminum cans. And if you ever walk down a highway, I've done a lot of walking since I started Open Carry Texas. There are so many beer cans on the side of the road. So if you want to kind of capitalize on that and raise some money, and you're throwing these beer cans in the back of your truck or maybe in the back of your car, all these empty beer cans, and a froggy cop decides he's going to pull you over, and he smells all the alcohol from these beer cans that you just picked up off the road while you were cleaning up the highway, well, now you're a felon. So, I mean, granted, those kinds of things would probably be explained away, but I mean, I'm just talking about the absurdity of our felony laws. There's a lot of, I kind of jump around here because I don't have my slides, but there are a lot of myths about open carry. Can anybody name, just throw something at me about why people don't like open carry?
You get your gun taken away from you.
You get your gun taken away from you. Absolutely. That's you know, when you open carry, it just invites a criminal to come up and steal your gun. There are
Scare children.
Yeah, there are 45 states. If you're Obama, there's 55 states. That 57. But there are 45 states that allow the open carry of handguns. 45. We are one of only 5 states that does not allow the open carry of a modern handgun. Now, Texas law does allow you to carry what's called a ball and cap pre-1899 replica, and that's the old, you know, pack the powder in, pack the ball in, put the cap on, you know, little old 6-shooters from the pre-1899, and they're about as long as my leg. So those you can openly carry, and you can openly carry rifles and shotguns. And I know a lot of people have seen us carrying around rifles and shotguns, and we had a really rough start at the beginning, not because we were doing anything wrong, but because we didn't know how to craft our message. And we got a lot of heat and a lot of hate, not only from the left and the anti-gun people, but surprisingly from a lot of pro-gun groups. The only way that we could draw awareness to the fact that we can't carry fire or carry handguns was to draw the line of the absurdity that I can walk around with an AR-15, I can walk around with an AK-47, I can walk around with any kind of rifle or shotgun, but I can't walk around with even the smallest .380 pistol on my hip. And the only thing, according to Texas law, that doesn't make you a criminal is putting a thin piece of fabric over that pistol. And if you pick it up, you're a criminal. Not criminal, criminal, not criminal, criminal, all right? So, going to having your pistols taken, with 45 states that allow open carry, it's funny because I used to say, name one time where this happened that somebody's had their gun taken from them, and I kid you not, 3 weeks ago, there was a story about some guy had just bought his gun like the day prior. I don't know what he was doing. He had a little .22 pistol, so it wasn't even really worth a lot anyway. But a guy walks up to him, he's like, nice gun, give it to me.
But you had a gun to take it.
But he had a gun to take it, right.
Yes.
So now I can't say name one story because there's a story. And I'm sure if you really look deep enough, there are going to be stories about people having their handguns taken. But the truth is that criminals are cowards. Every time a criminal is about to do something that breaks the law, in his head he's going through a risk-benefit analysis. Is the benefit worth the risk? If the benefit outweighs the risk, they're going to commit that crime. If the risk outweighs the benefit, they're not. For example, if you walk into any 7-Eleven or whatever, and there's a police officer there, the risk is pretty high that he's not going to get away with robbing the place. And it's not because of his shiny badge, because they're not afraid of those. It's not because of the pretty uniform or the Batman utility belt. It's because of that pistol that he's got on his side. Because they're not afraid of jail. They're not afraid of going to jail, they're afraid of getting shot. But if they walk in and they know, because the TABC pretty much says, if you've got a gun license, or if you've got an alcohol license, you can't bring a gun in here, they know that they're going to be able to get away with it because there's not going to be anyone that can stop them, i.e. Sandy Hook. What's the risk-benefit there? The benefit is, his goal is to kill as many kids as possible, right? So the benefit to him is killing as many kids as possible. What is the risk? There is no risk. He's going to be able to kill as many people as possible before he is confronted. So they always do these kinds of risk-benefit analysis. So if a criminal walks into that same gas station and he sees 1 or 2 people armed, openly carrying a handgun, he's probably going to assess that as a higher risk. Peter Rossi did a study called Armed and Dangerous a few years ago that found, he interviewed felons and violent criminals, and 57% of them said that they feared an armed citizen more than a police officer. The reason for that is because we don't have all the rules that police officers have. If you threaten me, I'm going to put a bullet through your chest. That's our standard of proof. So they feared that more. They also said that if they, 62% of them found that if they knew that their victim was armed, they would not go after that person. And then, you've got that 38%. Well, a lot of that is because the criminal's like, well, if I've got the gun first and I can't see the gun, it's probably harder for that person to get to. Even though I know he's armed, so I can probably see it through his clothes or whatever, but he's not going to be able to get it to it faster than I can take him on. So there's one of the myths. Another one of the myths is that it's exhibitionist. Open carry is just exhibitionist. I dressed intentionally in a shirt that I can tuck in, and I'm fat on a burger right now, so it's a little loose. But it is very difficult if you are dressed modestly, or professionally, I guess is the better word, where you've got a tucked in shirt. Where are you going to conceal your handgun? At least comfortably. It's very difficult to do. Women, where do you hide your guns? In your purse. I mean, I shouldn't be asking that question, but typically women hide their handguns in their purses. What is the first target of a criminal against women? It's their purse. Now they've got your money and your gun. Whereas if women could openly carry, and they typically wear tighter clothing, it's a little more difficult, a lot more difficult for women to conceal carry. There are times when they would like to arm themselves and not have to worry about being a victim of crime. The great thing about this country is, yeah, we've got crime, but the likelihood of you ever having to worry about being mugged is really very low. But that one time that you're a victim, you want to be prepared for it. And the only time I've ever been robbed was down in Ecuador. I was robbed at knife point because it's a gun-free zone down there in Ecuador, so they use knives to commit their crimes. Go here. The UK right now is a gun-free zone, but now they're trying to ban knives because too many people are getting stabbed. So gun-free don't work. So it's not exhibitionist. Carrying a handgun openly has several benefits. One is comfort, just comfort. The second is that it is a visual deterrent to crime. The criminal knows, as he's approaching you, once he sees that handgun, he knows that you're willing to use it. Otherwise, you wouldn't walk around with it. He knows that if he messes with you, he's at least going to be putting up a fight. And criminals don't want to fight. They want to go for what we call the soft target. So those are the two main things. It's not, I don't go around saying, hey, look at me, I don't carry a rifle because, hey, look at me, I can carry a rifle, do something about it. Or like the liberals like to tell me I'm compensating for something. I am compensating for something because I can't carry a pistol. That's what I'm compensating for. So it's not exhibitionist. Another thing that I hear a lot of is, well, open carry, it gets rid of your tactical advantage, the element of surprise. And this is kind of one of the more absurd things that I hear a lot. And I hear it a lot. Because I would prefer, and being a military guy, I know that the best tactical advantage at keeping an enemy at bay is a strong military. And I want the world to know that we have the strongest military out there. Because that keeps them from coming onto our shores. So, I also want to project as an individual that I am a strong-willed person with a gun. And again, I'm willing to use it. So the tactical advantage there is, the crime doesn't happen to begin with. The guy goes the other way and finds someone else. I think that's the best tactical advantage in combat, as in life, is to avoid the confrontation altogether. Now, assuming that you're reacting to a crime, you've got several issues. The crime's already in progress, so you've got to pull out your concealed handgun from wherever it is. And you run the risk of now, not only do you have to deal with the criminal, but you've got to deal with people who are running around, probably trying to get out, trying to get away, right in front of your line of shot. And so the tactical advantage now becomes actually worse, because you're responding to a crime in progress and whatever hysteria takes place after that. So ruining, the tactical, I like the tactical element of surprise. I prefer to own a gun my entire life and never once have to pull it out of its holster except to shoot at a paper target. That is my goal. And I say that because having been there and unfortunately having to take human lives, believe me, nobody wants to fire that shot. It is the hardest thing you will ever have to do in your life. And I guarantee you, if you ever get in that situation, because a lot of us say, come into my house and I'll shoot you. But I guarantee you, when you've got flesh and bone in front of you, that's a hard shot to take. So the best thing is just not to ever have to take that shot at all by open carrying when it's practical. Now, it's not always practical. We're not asking for open carry and then everybody has to open carry. But it should be an option. 2 days ago, I don't think anybody here watches Jon Stewart, but we were on The Daily Show, and I agreed to do an interview with The Daily Show about gun control and gun rights, and they only used like 5 seconds of the interview. But it was actually kind of funny because he's going through and he's asking different people, what's the most important thing to you? And one person says immigration, one person says free access to abortions, one person says, what was the other one? I forgot what the other one was. And then they come to me and I said, Texas, we're a pro-choice state. And he's like, whoa, pro-choice? Yeah, we should have the choice of open carrying or concealed carrying. And so he's like, so in Texas, pro-choice means guns. Absolutely. That's what it means to real people. And that's really what we're asking for is the choice. I don't open carry, for example, if I'm going to be in a very crowded market because I don't know who's bumping up against me. And I want to make sure that I maintain accountability to this firearm. What you'll find if you've ever had a chance, and as you travel the country, if you go to an open carry state, take a moment just to do it. And here's what you're going to find in yourself. It's kind of surprising. When you open carry, you are more aware of your surroundings than if you conceal carry. Because you know that this is out in the open. And most people that open carry, thankfully, they have good retention holsters, which is that's responsible. If you're going to open carry, you should have a good retention holster, just like the police do. This would be a retention holster if this was a real pistol, but something that you can't just pull the gun out, that you've got to push a button or move a mechanism or something like that. So you're actually more responsible as an open carry. And here's the great thing about it. If you're open carrying, you have nothing to hide. When I walk around, even with the rubber gun, because it looks real from a distance, I've even had people come up to me saying, hey, where'd you get your open carry license? But you know for a fact that everybody's watching you. So as a citizen, this is why this drives me nuts. The gun control line is, I don't know if you're a good guy or a bad guy. How do I know what your intentions are? Well, if it's concealed, I have the same intentions as if it's open. But at least when I'm open, you know what my intentions are. Because I know that every eye is on me as I walk around. Every person with a concealed handgun is watching me. So I'm actually more on my best behavior when I open carry, because I know the minute I go to reach for this gun, 10 other people are probably reaching for theirs. So that's why we love this line by Robert Heinlein that says, an armed society is a polite society. When one has to back up his actions with his life, he tends to be a little friendlier. Any other myths? I had a list.
Well, I can't remember who said this, if it was George Washington or Benjamin Franklin, but our form of government, our constitutional form of government, was created or designed for moral people. Okay. Who was it? George Washington. And if you do not have moral people, the system is not going to work. Okay, so my concern is, and it's bearing itself out, we're seeing that in our society today. I'm concerned about the militarization of our civilian life.
Yeah.
You know? And if honest, law-abiding citizens who want to protect themselves, their families, and their property, okay, I'm all good with that. And again, you're going to have the bad apples in society who would take advantage of this, you know, and so I'm just...
Well, let me respond to that. That's another great...
corral shootout
Yeah.
in your neighborhood.
Well, so I told you there's 45 open carry states. There are 31 of those 45 do not require you to have a license to open carry. So you can just open carry. There are 5 states that don't even ask, you don't have to have a license to open or concealed carry. Look at the crime stats in those states. The criminals, just like I do, know that if they're walking around with an exposed gun, they're being watched. They don't want to be watched. In their minds, in the criminal mind, they know what they're about to do or what they've already done. So they assume everybody else does. And so they're very nervous about that. Criminals don't just walk around letting everybody know that they're armed. I know that sounds weird. You would think that they would assimilate into that idea, but they don't. Because they have a different mindset. Their thoughts are, I'm about to commit a crime, or I just committed a crime, I can't get caught. And if I'm carrying an open firearm, believe me, even in states where it's legal, you're probably going to get stopped by a police officer just because you've got a gun, even though that's illegal. But criminals just don't do that. And we've got 31 states where unlicensed open carry is a daily life. And still, you don't have a lot of people doing it. You'll see a few people here and there that open carry. Unless you go to Alaska, then everybody open carries up there. But again, the criminals just don't do that. And the best way, I hate co-opting an NRA phrase, but I keep co-opting their phrases, but the best way to keep an immoral person moral is by showing him that he better stay moral. And it actually lowers the crime rate. Arizona enjoys a 36% lower crime rate since they instituted constitutional carry, which is no licenses to carry a handgun. Then 2010 is when they passed that law. And here's another story for you. Kennesaw, Georgia, I love this town because they passed an ordinance that requires every citizen to have a gun.
Yep.
Now, I mean, they can't really enforce that, but they require every citizen to have a gun. In the first year, crime dropped 92%.
Yes.
In the first year. To date, and this was back in, I think, late 90s or early 2000s, I can't remember. But even today, crime is still 74% lower than it was before they passed that law.
It was actually 1989.
Oh, it was even earlier than that?
Yeah, because we moved to Atlanta, we moved to Kennesaw from Michigan, and we lived in Kennesaw when they passed that law. And it was 1989 or 1990 because we moved to Atlanta in 1988.
Okay, I got so many stats and figures going through my head. Okay, thank you for that. And really quick, I'll get to you 1 second, sir. Just on Kennesaw, Georgia, then we'll move on from that. There's a great anecdotal story from Kennesaw. 2 carloads full of thugs pulled up to a Waffle House on the back little alley there. They pulled up to a Waffle House. They sent in a scout to go in. This is about 5:30 in the morning. They were going to go rob this Waffle House. They sent a scout in to find out, okay, who's in there, what's it look like? Again, risk-benefit, risk-benefit. The scout, he walks in, and there's only 2 people in the whole restaurant other than the employees. And these 2 gentlemen are sitting at a table, and they both got exposed 1911 45 ACP pistols on their hips, in holsters. The scout walks back out, goes back to the 2 carloads full of thugs, and I imagine, let's just say there's only a driver. The story doesn't say exactly how many people were in there, it just says 2 carloads full of colonels. But let's just assume there's a driver and a passenger. A driver and a passenger. So you've got at least 4 people plus the scout, 5 people, right? So they outnumber this guy. But the scout goes out and tells them, hey, there's 2 guys with guns in there. So he says, let's go. They're loading up. It just so happens, and the only reason we know this story is a sheriff's deputy was driving by and saw these 2 cars behind the Waffle House. Looks suspicious. So he pulls up, sees all the guns. They've got rifles and pistols. They greatly outnumbered and outgunned those 2 individuals with pistols. It would have been very easy to go in there and just cap those 2 guys and still rob the place. But those 2 carloads full of guys, and I like to imagine there was 4 in each car just because it makes me feel better. But since I don't know, I usually go with the lower number so it doesn't look like I'm trying to inflate anything. Those 2 people deterred guys with rifles, ski masks, and pistols.